again, my counter to that is, well, what if we didn't start from zero? What if we started from 40 or something? So um, I think that especially in light of a lot of kind of community feedback that I've had my ear to over the last few years, I think our community I think
would be more
I think
involved
that
if they felt
especially in light of
welcome
and normal for that to be the case, that like that we're more integrated into our culture, I guess I want to say. And so the proposal is integrate that into our culture. And so it's going to be a lot of things, right? It's going to be a website overhaul. The website is going to clearly communicate. I keep doing that. Clearly communicate the way this community of production members works, and include an invitation to the onboarding or the ingress process for that. I had other examples, but I lost them.
Marley.
So how is that different than the existing model that we have? Because the 2023 Discord server is still up. It was never taken down. So I'm not really sure what's different with this model.
Yeah. Okay. It's likely that I'm not doing a great job of explaining it. So I will just say that it's not about Discord. Like, that's not the point. So you're right. The Discord is still on, but no one's looking at it. I'm not looking at it. I was the producer that year, and I'm not looking at it. So it kind of is about what's expected and what norms we're establishing. Because my expectation that year was, okay, Critical's over. We're gonna do our wrap stuff and we're done, because that was what we did. And I stopped looking at the Discord, and nobody's talking in Discord as far as I know. They might be, I don't know, but that's not what is expected currently in the community. So it's really more about changing the norms than the tool.
Anything else? Questions for Reboot? Reboot, do you have any? Jimmer's hand is up.
The continuity sounds good as a concept. Is there anything that you might need from us? Because the board uses Slack basically, but not Discord. Is there overlapping integration, or would that be just sort of hop over to that for that conversation?
So we've been talking about integrating the board more into critical production as well, and that's related. So certainly board members will be invited into that space and invited to participate in that space even more so than before. And that's an ongoing thing that we're figuring out, right? There's going to be a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of figuring stuff out as we go, but if I get some closing remarks on this, it is essentially inverting, for the most part, the flow of agency and initiative, so that it comes mostly from leads who are doing most of the work, with an amount of project management, cat herding, clearly budget oversight from producers, and an amount of like sanity check, veto authority for sure, and a lot of encouragement. But I'm hopeful that we can tell people, we want you to care about this, and we know you already do. So we want to know we don't just want to know what you think we should do. We want you to start doing it.
Bestar.
This is actually not related to Reboot. Sorry, Reboot. Magic, I guess at least one person was not able to hear Jimmer. I know we've had this problem with Jitsi, where it's sort of like every now and then, like half the people can't hear the other people. I just as a heads up. I don't know if is anyone else having problems hearing anybody? I guess raise your hand.
I think Aaron's Augie's comment happened when Aaron was speaking. Augie, did you have the same problem with Jimmer?
No, I did not. I heard everybody else clearly.
Okay, so it was just Aaron for now. If we do notice a pattern that's disrupting the meeting, I'll go conjure a Google Meet link, and we can all migrate over to Google Meet, and I'll keep this room open and watch for people showing up and shepherd them over to Google Meet. So anybody who feels like we've got two separate meetings in this, what should be technologically one meeting, please scream real loud, and we'll migrate.
Thanks, y'all.
Fun story from the archive. I noticed, like, on the theme of the board participating as a team in maybe even one of the departments in the event, I found an artifact from 2019, which was someone filled out what looked like a standardized department definition. In fact, it was Ben that filled this out, calling it the department of the board and describing the hours of operation, the department's description, their build task list, event and or daily task list, and department protocols and procedures, just like every other department in the event. And to me, that is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. Board's not special. Board's here to support the event just like everybody else. And I feel like working together like that feels real good to me. Reboot.
So one last thing for producer updates, requesting that the board announce the producer for Critical to the community, which I mentioned last night, but I figured I'd mention it here. And I will put a photo in the Slack right now.
Yeah, that's the only thing we're waiting on, Reboot.
Okay, thank you. My bad.
And I believe there was a specific adjective required for that, but I'm not here to repeat that.
Yeah, the request was that it be a jaunty photo.
A jaunty photo. All right. Anything else?
Minutes.
Awesome. Anything else, Reboot, from Critical? All right. Next, C-compression. Do we have a crash or a radioactive? I don't see one. All right. I'll continue reaching out and hope to hear back someday. On to minutes from last month. Board, does anybody have corrections to request? All right. Hearing no corrections or objections, we'll consider the minutes from last month approved as submitted. New items. The board met over a couple of evenings in the last week, and we negotiated and approved our 2025 budget. Giles, I know you've been busy with work stuff, but do you want to give an overview of that? Otherwise, I'm happy to backstop that.
If you can, I don't have it up on my screen on the final thing. If you would actually be able to share it, I can talk through it.
I can absolutely do that. Here we go.
All right. What's the easiest way to start with this? Let me give you a couple key highlights and we can sort of talk through pieces. We go to the right-hand side of this and let's look at these pieces here. So for 2024, we ran a $49,000 in the red in the black. Sorry, a good thing. So despite our best efforts, in some ways, we managed to turn a profit, primarily by Critical nailing it in terms of finances. So in the budget that we put here, you'll notice in the 2025 column, which is AG, we are supposing that we will run a $90,000 surplus next year. We are looking at later in the year, if that looks like that's going to happen, we will add more spending. But right now, this is a pretty conservative kind of bet. So let me kind of walk you through then what we did with this budget. So run us over to admin, Feynman. So in the admin category, so admin is basically all of our hosting, our licensing. It's kind of like what it takes to run the org. And we are basically going to run that. Why is it 7,000 less? Uh-oh, that doesn't quite meet my story. How did we end up with 7,000 less in our admin budget?
Wide saw. Do we know anything about that number there? Magic, do you know anything about that number there? Or
I didn't know that.
Okay, missed that piece. The general plan for admin was to run. We didn't subtract any kind of major pieces in here, so the admin budget should run the same for the years. We did increase things by some inflationary amounts, which we used 5%, I think, Magic, for inflation.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So it looks like those columns got.
yeah,
Got
some-
So takeaway to understand in this kind of sense. So we're talking about rough order magnitude of 300K is what our organization kind of runs through and operates with. We spend 20 to 30,000 kind of running the org, right? So for nonprofits, that's considered quite good. What that really says is the board does all the work in terms of admin kind of thing, right? We don't have an executive director. We actually don't have an admin at these points. So primarily we spend our money on software hosting, right? And accountants and tax kind of pieces. Okay. Next bit, fundraising. So these are things that we use to actually raise funds ourselves. And this includes the kind of the merchant costs and all the pieces that we run through here. Again, this category is fairly small and plans on just increasing by the 5%.
And notably, this is like member contributions, like Firestarter contributions and corporate matching is really what's mostly reflected as revenue in this column.
Yeah, and the cost structure is quite low because, again, we're not advertising. There isn't a salesperson. There's really not much in the way of expenses to this category.
Magic.
Cold Contrast. I don't recognize that name, but someone has a hand up. Go ahead.
Magic.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just want during this meeting to announce that some companies like Microsoft and others in the area will match volunteer hours. So if you want that number to go up in our fundraising category, that's where we're getting that money from largely.
And I would add, if you're here participating in this meeting right now, it absolutely counts as volunteering with Ignition.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go over critical then. So for critical last year, total expenditures were about 142,000. The way we modeled this year is with a 5% inflation and then a 20 or was it 25% increase for the expected growth of the event. And the way this ends up working out is that the revenue scales faster than the expenses. Like if we get the lower loop, we're not really talking about a huge increase in what it costs us to run the event. So that modeling is quite positive, and that's one of the reasons why we show a $90,000 surplus, and we're not planning on spending that yet, right? Let's make sure that we get the lower loop, that, all those kind of things later in the year, post-critical. If we decide that we legitimately have that windfall, we'll discuss what to do with that. On the C compression, so this year we lost about $30,000. What does it say? 26,000 on that event. What we decided to do was model that as not growing on the expenses side. So we basically, or sorry, Magic, can you walk us through the
Sure thing.
modeling on that one you put together?
Yeah, so for C compression for the 2025 budget, we decided collectively to base the expenses. We're allowing ourselves for that to be based on how much revenue we took in, plus that 5% inflation. I think it's like 87,000. If you scroll up a little bit, then you can see the revenue. So yeah, it was 80,500 in 2024, and we're planning for 85,000 in 2025, and we scaled down our expenses just uniformly by the ratio that gets our expenses to match our revenue. Our goal is to use this as a conversation for trying to choose a space that we can afford to not run in the red, run at the expense of our grants and other opportunities, or like program fees, like Pratt grants, for example, could be funded instead of like running C compression in the deficit. So all told, we're basing our budget based on how much revenue we realistically got, and then we're going to try and use that as a conversation piece for kind of meeting that goal.
Thanks, Magic.
Mhm.
Okay, so those are the program things. So let's talk through. So we had a $40,000 surplus for this year. What we decided to do, 49,000. What we decided to do was allocate half of that surplus to new spending. This is not yet policy for the board, but we're thinking through the basic gist of if we run a surplus a year, then we increase things like grants, we increase purchases of things that might help the org long term. We're kind of looking at that as a spend half, bank half kind of bit. What was that minus 11,000 was from where, Jimmer? Or that was the new spending, right? Outside of the grant stuff. Yeah, so the categories, is your list over on the right useful for me, Feynman? Let's see if so some high orders of that, scroll to the right. Conduct committee asked for 8,200 for training and to spend that group up and get them really prepared for their mission. So we approved that. The acculturation committee had 2,000 for a newbie picnic and some swag and some other promotion pieces to bring them forward. We had a DPW radio upgrade and cable trays that we funded. And then, am I missing anything else besides the grants, which I'll talk through now?
Those were the things that stand out in my memory.
Okay. All right. And so then the final piece we did, we basically took the rest of the change that we had and put that back into the grants area. I'm actually not staring at my numbers, but we ended up having about, let me look at my little thing.
Giles, here, I've highlighted at least the total grants across all classes for 2024 and 2025.
Thank you. Okay. So we spent 23,000 this year. We plan on spending 38 next year. That's going to include the return of the Pratt program. So we'll at least we're ballparking around 3,000 to 5,000 there, depending on applicants. And then the rest of that will go into either other education like Flameflex classes or other things that build our community. And then the rest goes into more grants for critical and C compression, TBD, the exact allocation there. But the plan is to have the grants committee kind of sort through the new pieces of that and come back and propose what they want to use for education and what they want to use for each event.
Thank you, Giles. Any questions or comments from anyone in the room? Reboot.
I have a comment. I would like to suggest that next year, when the board is calculating the budget for critical, that if a producer has been selected, that the producer be involved in that, at least to a consulting capacity.
I think that's a reasonable request, the thing that I will say in defense of the process here is that both of the event budgets are still total straw persons. The intent is to go through the usual, you start onboarding staff, departments have opinions about what changes need to be made year over year, and we have a bona fide negotiation. Like the number could end up higher than this, the number could end up lower than this. This is absolutely not policy for the year. This is an overall picture for the year. That said, I do think that it's a reasonable request that you made. I think early input, I totally see the value in early input, and we'll make an effort to see if we can line up calendars next year if selection and budget meeting scheduling and all of that stuff works out like it did this year. Jimmer, and then Giles.
Yeah, to second how sort of fluid and nebulous this is for getting, flexible points within it. We even talked about how we plan to revisit the budget, this specific annual budget, later on in the year, approximately August, to see, after critical, to see how things go, with the specific consideration of giving grants to more education settings. So we're going to be reintegrating education with the grants this year in a way that didn't happen last year. And so that's part of the gray zone that we're moving around in. And so fear not, yeah, there's definitely space to design.
Giles, then Magic.
So a question, Reboot, on timing of things. When you do the RAP report, would you actually be able to propose what increase you need in budget, or is it really once you get in, or like from a timing perspective, they're only like a month or two off? Like if we included you in our last discussion a couple weeks ago, would that have changed things, or could that be part of the RAP report?
Well, first, I'll just say that I'm satisfied with Feynman's response, and also, it is not technically accurate to say that the RAP report is supposed to arrive in December or even November. We are supposed to be generating the RAP report much earlier than that, and that is one of the things that I'm hoping to address this coming year, and that comes from processes. So to answer your actual question, I think in the ideal case, when the RAP report is concluded, no, people are generally not yet wrapping their heads around what projects might look like for next year in a concrete enough way that they could estimate cost.
Okay, thanks.
Just jumping on that topic briefly, and then I'll go back to why I raised my hand. I think it would be great if during the annualization, or like having year-round volunteers, if you're engaging volunteers in some like post-mortem or after-action report style thing, asking like expressly if there are budget increases that would help their department, or changes, or what wasn't used, or whatever, that would help. Jumping back, I'd like to second what Jimmer said earlier, that we're planning to revisit the budget after critical, and hopefully give more education and art grants, potentially for longer art pieces that take more time, or to get people paid earlier so that they can, be working on art during the winter. Also, I want to call it the timing there is after critical, because a lot of this budget, especially the growth in revenue and the forecast extra in the black, is based on expanding into the lower loop in the Masonic Family Park, and selling more tickets. If that doesn't happen, or if ticket costs are changed, or some uncertainty in the future changes revenue, like we can't really do that. I wanted to highlight though that all of these like growth numbers are based on like more ticket sales, and coupled to that pretty strongly.
All right, anyone else have questions on this budget?
All right. Thanks, everybody. Next up, I have some committee composition conversations to have. So as we discussed, and we've already done one round of this, we've got a handful of new board members, some of whom are already substantially integrated in some of nonsense.
You can finish.
Okay. So we've got a handful of new board members that are already substantially integrated into some of our committee processes and wanted to pursue recognizing that / unlocking, I guess, the status and the guilt-free access that comes along with an official co-chair position. In particular, well, nonsense. Maybe I'll pause here. Does your hand fit at this point or later?
It does.
Great.
Yeah. I would like to move that we appoint Magic co-chair of the tech committee.
Second. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. The ayes have it on that one. Since we're doing efficient cut directly to the chase, I move to appoint Nonsense as co-chair of the comms committee.
Seconded.
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Nonsense.
Yeah, and I'm just also going to officially resign as co-chair of the tech committee. Thank you guys. You guys are great.
Sure thing.
Aye.
And then one more tech committee related thing. I move to add Magic as one of our tech directors. For those of you that may not know what that is, that's essentially board IT. We're the ones that process, can I please have an email account requests? Can you please add me to Slack requests? That sort of stuff.
Ooh, seconded.
All in favor say aye.
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 All
Aye.
opposed say nay. All right. Magic is now tech director. And I think the next two things actually do need a little bit of conversation. I'll start with Magic has been very, very, very helpful with treasury related things since Magic started on the board, including getting and largely driving a resolution last month to get our money into an account that can make a little bit of money. We're not sitting on an infinite reserve, but we're not sitting on a non-trivial reserve either. And it seemed like the right idea. So Magic, total props there. On that front, we've discussed for a while sort of a notion of a backup treasurer or a deputy treasurer is the phrase that I sort of settled on in my mind. Happy to discuss that role. But I think it would be pretty neat for us to name Magic the deputy treasurer for now, obviously to be reconsidered with all of the officer positions at the spring onboarding. And I think that the nature of what I'm picturing is that Magic sort of continues helping out with treasury related things, sort of an assistant to the treasurer / shadow, learn a little bit about what's going on in the treasury, etc. And I think that this is separate from and also compatible with, we need to have a conversation about the finance committee and dusting it off, because I think that there's a role for a finance committee in this neighborhood in the organization design as well. Marley, your hand is up.
We do have that role, and Nonsense was appointed to it, which I'm sure she is in favor of this too, but it's called the Treasure Shadow. So Nonsense is currently holding that role.
Wow.
I'd forgotten that we had that.
Me too.
I'm happy to step down from that role as well. Thank you so much.
Marley, you're brilliant. Well done.
I move to appoint Magic as our deputy treasurer.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 All
Aye.
opposed say nay. The ayes have it. All right. Now we're on to a handful of discussion topics. So I'm going to leave. Any committees have committee reports that they need time reserved for? Because I want to end by 8:30, and
I have a quick one, but my committee is still not on there. It's the alumni committee.
great. We'll reserve. How much time do you think you need, Marley?
Couple minutes, less than 5.
Okay, we'll make sure to reserve time for the alumni committee's report.
Maybe 3 minutes for tech committee.
Okay, we'll reserve time for. So we'll hold at least 10 minutes at the end for those two committee reports, unless anybody jumps in with another big thing. But
I mean,
Jimmer.
events probably has enough to go over, but it would be like just 2 or 3 minutes of this is what we're up to.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll reserve 15 minutes for committees at the end. So that gives us about half an hour for these 3 topics. And I'll go ahead and list all of them for the room. This isn't intended to be like a progressive reveal, grand mystery, hold you all in suspense thing. We want to talk about what I wrote down. This is kind of clunky and we'll explain more, is federating the production model, which I think Reboot didn't exactly talk about. But I kind of foreshadowed it in that conversation, board members helping produce. So that bullet point, I made it even more clunkier when reading it out loud just now, but to read it out loud, federating the production model, board members helping produce. Next topic, access and offboarding policies, specifically including what's our definition of good standing and what depends on standing, such as access, offboarding. And then finally, a brief discussion on consensus gamification. I saw on the site, this is called a wiki poll, I think. Did I get that right? As a potential tool for studying community sentiment and getting mass feedback in an actionable and informative way. So those are our 3 topics. Jimmer, your hand is up.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you could drop the budget as center screen so that we could focus more on whatever it is you're about to talk about theoretically.
Thank you so much. Yep, that's a very good prompt. Thanks. All right, let's talk federating the production model and board members helping produce. So I'll kick this off, but I don't have a structured pitch here or anything. I want to see a future where the board, like I said, where the board is at least a department of the events, right? Where board members are participating in event production. Some of the obvious hazards to worry about here includes being on the board is a time commitment. Helping produce an event is a time commitment. And also, I think that there are ways that we can make those obligations compatible. And then there's kind of a broader question that I want to pursue feedback on from the room. So this is pretty open-ended, which is, what do we think about board members actually not just being the board department, but participating in events? There's kind of this tradition. I've even heard it quoted as policy, but I cannot source that anywhere in the archives on my own. I have just struck out. It's possible that it's there. And if anybody can help me find it, I would certainly appreciate that data point as well. But what do we think? Like, is that a line that we feel is important to hold? Beth Star and then Reboot.
Clearly, the people that got their hands up the fastest have strong feelings about this topic. I am not opposed to the idea. I think, being one of the people that would be heavily affected by this policy if we set one, having been, on critical production for the past 4 years, and then also being on the board now, I'm a little torn about it. On the one hand, I have concerns because, like, with the amount that I am doing right now on the board, I do not think that it would be responsible for me to be a lead for critical. On the other hand, we're not your mom. So, like, I worry about it because I do think it's an extremely heavy load to try and do both. But on the other hand, we're talking about adults who are volunteering. And yes, we have a burnout problem. And maybe we kind of build that into the interview process when someone's going to take on 2 roles. to be like, hey, we really want you to think about this. Like, have you thought about, where you're going to get those spoons? But in the end, I don't know. I feel like we should trust people to know what their limits are, I think. Except I don't know that I trust myself. So I don't know.
Reboot, then Giles, then Jimmer.
Yeah. So one way to think about this is, what if the board sort of at its core included the assumption that it was the entity producing events, and by it I mean a subset. So, and I think this. So I know that this is one of the things that Feynman and I have been talking about. So for example, suppose that every year the board chose 3 of its members, largely by hand raise and consensus, to be the producers of the event, and that was considered their major contribution to the board for that year. They don't have to run committees like producing the events, the committee. Furthermore, as I may have mentioned earlier, I think it's a really good idea to make the job of producing the events easier, take less time, be spread out more across the year, and involve a lot fewer hours. So I support it, and I would be willing to engage in a pilot of the experiment.
Giles, Jimmer, Marley.
So the one area I see that could be when we've got the stipends going on, we need to avoid paying board members. And so that might be one area that if we had a board member as a lead or a producer, I don't know that stipends are a good idea for that.
Jimmer.
Yeah, for having crossed that bridge, I know that I can almost anticipate Reboot's response to that, which I appreciate, and that is, for other conversation, stopping the intake of that money has already been offered in this plan, from what I understand. Yeah, my head scratching concern comes from where we typically have voting ethics issues, where, like, say for instance, my camp is up for a grant. I'm not allowed to, financially gain from anything that I do, so I can't vote for it. So I don't know where the finances are, but even if it's like voting on this, that, or the other thing, we would need to, and Tuck spoke to this a little bit today and I'd love to hear from him if he's still in the room, about this, because certainly he can speak to this better than I. But it would be nice for us to sort of codify what we think our ethics around voting are. I think that would be the conversation that would make me more comfortable to as we lay it out.
Marley.
I think it's 2 separate questions, and I'll try not to be too long-winded. The board producing an event versus one board member being a producer are 2 different things. And I think the board producing an event is fine. Like that, I think that would be a good pilot to try out. And I think the legal and ethical problems would be a lot less if it was the board producing it. I think one board member being a producer causes some issues with conflict of interest, with having to deal with your own contracts, your own negotiations, having to step out of a ton of conversations. And I think that can be problematic. A board member being a lead, I can tell you about that because I just did it when we had an emergency. And sea compression is a lot less work than critical. But yeah, it's a lot of work. And we did have a board member as a producer on sea compression last year as well. Same situation. There was an emergency and there was no choice. And those things are like big time commitments. My role wasn't a huge one as box office, but it was definitely a time commitment, especially given the crunch. So there are those issues. I think a lead is slightly different because there's one level removed between you and the board, and you're not making those decisions. So you have to be able to not act as a board member in that case. And I was lucky because Jimmer was the board liaison, and we had an agreement that Jimmer made all the board decisions. And I think in that case, if you were not making any board decisions, it's a little bit easier from that situation. But yes, I think board the entire board as a producer is a very different and much more palatable situation than one board member.
Reboot, then Tuck.
I'll try to be fast. So yeah, I think at least among current producers, removing the stipend is on the table. To address one of the concerns Jimmer mentioned, producers have enormous control over the budget currently. I think moving that model into the board would actually give the board a lot more oversight and accountability over expenditures. And to Marley's point, a way I would support doing this is to consider the board to be the producer via, a subcommittee of one to three selected members who will take it on for that year. And I think if you take out the monetary exchange, the legal consideration, the need for the contracts kind of goes away, because there's an implicit liability attachment by virtue of being board members. That's it.
Tuck.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree that there would be conflicts of interest that would exist. Although without a stipend, I think that the conflict becomes a lot less. But those can be controlled. I mean, it would be up to the individual to be informed about the consequences of being a producer and on the board at the same time, and choosing whether or not it's something that's right for them. I mean, unless we're amending our bylaws to say that a producer can't be a board member, I don't think it's really our position to say, yes or no because you're a producer. I think that, especially given precedent, that would need to be a separate conversation, I guess. So my view is that, yes, there's a bit of a conflict, but as long as the person is informed about it, if they still want to be on the board, I don't think it's our place to say no.
I had my hand up, and I think Jitsi helpfully took it down. But quick point. I think so. 2 quick points, actually. I think everyone here understands that having conflicts of interest is totally normal, right? Like, not addressing them is bad. So failure to address conflicts of interest is where organizations fail or get in trouble, etc. As required by law, we have a conflict of interest policy as an organization. We could certainly afford to review it, consider amendments to it, etc., that sort of make it match the risks specific to our community. But it's also important to note that there's a section below, like, here's how we define conflict, to here are the tools that we use to address conflict. And that includes usual things like recusal, or other things along those lines. I think we're universally aligned on it would not be a particularly great idea to pay a producer who is in this situation, but I do actually want to dispel another myth that I hear perpetuated a lot in our community, which is it's not actually illegal or even against the bylaws for a board member to get compensated by Ignition. It raises a lot of questions and has to be navigated very, very carefully. What can't happen is a board member cannot be compensated for their board member duties, right? But if a board member happens to be the best accountant that Ignition can find, a board member could be hired as a paid accountant by Ignition, as long as they're only being paid for their accounting services. And then finally, I think there are obviously other pros and cons here as well. Reboot alluded to this a little bit. There's a little bit of a nice alignment of incentives situation, I think, that having someone who's on the board, or all of the board and all of the producers being of the same team, which is, it's real hard for the board to be dragging its feet and failing to deliver on a critical dependency if the group that the board is impeding is itself, right? There's a whole lot more accountability for agility, unblocking things where they need unblocked, etc. And there's less opportunity for confusion around responsibility and things like that. So with that, I'll stop talking magic and then Marley.
Yep. I would agree with everyone here about conflict of interest for financial gain. I think that it is against the bylaws to have financial gain, but we can talk about that more later. I think that's not really something that anyone is seeking right now as a board producer, hypothetically. There are other conflicts that we would have to navigate, like anything at event that requires a board of the day and a producer and a ranger lead or something like that would need that person to wear just one hat. I would think maybe potentially we don't have producers be board of the day at all, because that just sounds like too much work for anyone, but also because of that conflict. I think I agree with Feynman that the alignment is there. I think broadly the core mission of a board member is to nurture this organization and our community. And I don't see a direct conflict with producers who are doing that with all of their time to passionately support the organization and the community, right? So I think the core alignment is 100% there. I do have some concern about the roles bleeding a little bit bidirectionally. I don't think the board should be like heavy-handed in how an event happens each time. I think the producers have a lot of leeway to like have executive direction there, and I don't think that I'd want for decisions that would normally go to a producer and can be made quickly, that I don't want them to bleed into like becoming board votes or people thinking that's like a board responsibility because there's a board producer who's making the choice. So drawing clearer boundaries there would probably be good. Writing them down, having norms that everyone understands and agrees to, I think would be really important. Overall, I think there's probably pretty good alignment here. One more thing I would oppose is like all producers being on the board. I don't want it to be the case that we discourage people from becoming producers because they don't want to like take on a board commitment for 3 years. I think people should be able to be producers for 1 year, or like try it out as an associate producer and see if they like it or not. Even at the producer, like top level producer level, I don't think we should mandate that anyone be a board member to be a producer. Marley, I think.
Yep, Marley, then Reboot.
I'll be brief. I just want to make a point about the fact that we can do something doesn't necessarily mean that we should. And we have had a really bad stretch of conflict of interest, issues with the board, and the perception of impropriety. So just because it's legal and we can doesn't mean that we necessarily should do it. Like skirting the law or skirting the things that we are able to do has gotten this board in trouble repeatedly over the past few years. So I feel like, you know, running the borders of what we can do is not always the best thing.
Reboot.
So agreeing with Marley, but from a different direction, I think those problems can be solved by simply removing the conflict. For example, in the case of remuneration, just don't do that. Problem solved, right? Similarly with the thing Magic was talking about, even now, technically, the rule Magic was talking about was if someone's to be evicted from the event, the ideal case is that producer, board member of the day, and ranger lead confer and agree on that decision. It is, however, technically the truth that it is the producer's decision, and the producer is advised to seek the counsel of the other two parties. But it is technically just one person's decision right now. But the point is that rule can be changed. It's just a contractual stipulation, and we could change that to whatever makes sense for us. I also wanted to address the point about letting someone be a producer for just 1 year. It takes longer than that to gain mastery of this. It's complicated. There's a lot to it. It takes more than a year to be good at producing this event from experience.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. I don't think I had a concrete outcome that I wanted to achieve here tonight on this, so much as exploring overall temperature on these themes? Magic?
I had one element that I forgot, which is seconding what Tech said about if someone wants to jump into this role, let them. I think if someone's running from the community and is elected to be a board member and is known to be a producer at the time, I don't think we have like a mandate to override a community will like that. So I think I would trust in our election process.
Reboot?
I don't want to speak for you, Feynman, but I'll speak for myself. And I think there's a difference between a producer wants to join the board and we are thinking about adopting a culture where the board is the entity that produces events. And there are other events that do it this way, by the way. There are I think it's Freezer Burn. They have a board of 9 people and all 9 of them produce their event. So there's a precedent for it.
Jimmer?
It almost sounds like it would be like a super committee, right? Like if it was 3 people, you say, and Magic, speaking to the totally sound thinking that you brought, having to do with, what if somebody doesn't want to be a board member but they want to produce, right? It's a remarkably good angle to consider. That committee could contain that, perhaps, but to what end? I think that would it's an interesting pot to create, and you certainly have a position where you can work towards crafting what that shape might look like right now. Reboot, indeed. I'm just a little bit concerned about the long-term sustainability of it, because it creates a responsibility for the board that doesn't exist currently, nor has it historically. Not that it's a bad idea, but I'm worried that the current momentum or inertia overlapped for whichever engine you're looking at, might lead to some tugs that don't allow it to really fruit. So transitioning into it, I think, is something we should take at a relatively paced patterning if we decide to go that way. Yeah.
All right. I think that's a wrap on that topic. We've got 10 minutes left officially to get through 2 things. I think one of them is fairly short. The first one will be a little bit longer, but let's try to get out of here with concrete outcomes and a reasonable amount of discussion. So the topic is access and offboarding policies. Specifically, I would like to come out of here with a definition for what we mean when we say member in good standing, and what access to what depends on good standing. Does anyone have opening thoughts on this? Marley?
Yeah, so one of the questions that came up with me happened with an event posting. So my suggestion for good standing would be somebody that we should, insert flag level here, and who is able to attend events, and what access they should have should be kind of commensurate with the events. If they're not able to attend events, they probably should also not have access to an INW email, and should probably also not have access to our Slack community. But with the caveat that they should also have a process in place, which we do not have right now. So there should not be an indefinite, this has not been reviewed kind of thing attached to this. So that might be a little bit more complicated until we have our policies firmed up. But if they're not able to attend events, they should also not have all those other benefits, is my opinion.
Other thoughts in the room? Magic?
Specifically with respect to town halls, we've got bylaws about allowing people to attend, but there's a clause in the bylaws about adhering to Washington state law, and Washington state law like requires us to maintain the safety of our members. And I think if there's threats of violence or anything that would make someone unable to attend a town hall because there's a conflict, I think that we have it in our power to make an exceptional case for excluding people from a town hall or asking them to not like participate in person.
Aaron.
Around the idea of just like what is the definition of a member in good standing, this seems like something that I can imagine that we would be able to rely on best practices for. Like other organizations have to define what good standing is. It feels like with a bit of research we could come up with a pretty good idea.
Marley.
I'm chuckling a little bit because I'm on the board of 3 other nonprofits, and this is currently causing a very large nonprofit that I'm on the board of to implode. So this is a difficult question for a lot of boards right now.
Jimmer.
It seems it might be easier to define what a member not in good standing would be, and then everybody else is in good standing.
In the just very quick research I did, that looks like how a lot of people do it. Of a member that has not been otherwise expelled or suspended or withdrawn.
Certainly, but starting with that as our starting point, it might be easier to create that language around it. Please, Tuck.
Tuck.
Yeah, I'm curious. We're talking about this for purposes of determining like how many Ignition members or how many of the people that we know to be Ignition members actually need to vote. Is that the point of the definition?
Not really. No, this is literally, it's much, much narrower than that. This question is literally access to information systems. Or at least that's the context in which this currently came up. Nonsense.
Yeah, and I would also just point out that, like, because of the squishiness of this definition, people who are on our do not attend list, there's not a written policy anywhere that says our do not attend list equates to not being a member in good standing, which I think in general we would probably agree that that should be the case, but that's not defined in policy anywhere as far as I'm aware.
Magic. Sorry, Megaphone first, then Magic.
I just wanted to point out that in addition to that, members who are not in good standing or members who are on our ban list are still in systems receiving emails and in like the Critical Northwest group that is a members only Facebook group. I don't know if that means anything, but that's not like ever been a process that we've like removed them from groups or anything like that.
Yeah, I think those are examples of the sorts of things that we're talking about now. So if we want to come out of here with a policy, we need to start heading that way. Magic?
Yeah, I move that people that are added to the ban list be removed from various communication and information systems that we control, so long as that removal does not violate confidentiality.
Nonsense.
I'm not against this as a motion, but I mean, my question in response to it is, do we want to create a larger policy that's more comprehensive instead of doing this in a piecemeal way?
Marley?
I'm going to read Chuck's comment real quick, but I think we need to create a definition for not in good standing or in bad standing before we do that.
Jimmer?
Yeah, so I'm in the chorus with Nonsense, Marley, and Tuck here. Being thoughtful that we are looking at a broader picture than, we have this list over here, let's kick them out of a Facebook group or whatever the specific email setting that I know that you said it was narrow, that narrow setting. I think that coming from substantial paragraphs versus a line item in this meeting would be a better way to go. I would make a motion that we create language that supports the goals that you are attempting to succeed at between now and the next meeting, and at that point vote on those
Second.
words.
All right, we've got a motion and a second for. I
We need
moved
that motion
to.
a little bit clarified though.
I
Yep.
moved to amend. Actually, I moved to amend that. Well, is this technically a separate motion? I'd like us to name a committee or committees that we expect to do that work instead of saying we will do this between now and the next meeting, because I don't know who we is. Lots of hands. Giles, then Magic, then Nonsense.
Yeah, mine was still on discussion. So one error case I see here that we just kind of need to work through is of different flag levels, and I'll just take whatever our lowest problem is. If we cut them out of all comms and communication channels, are we stopping them from sort of ever being able to be forgiven if that's something that we do eventually? And so I just want to I think we need to be fairly clear about which levels of flags also equal not in good standing.
That was
Ma-
not my suggestion, so I don't know if anybody made that suggestion.
Magic, Nonsense, Aaron.
Yep, I think Marley's suggestion was that we also need a process to return to the community. So, and I think that we have a conduct committee. I think that they should be able to write a document that describes what it means to be in good standing or not in good standing. And then we can vote on that next time. I do think it should I do think it should include a means to come back into the community and this like different levels of severity as well as concepts.
Nonsense.
Yeah, I was just going to volunteer for this, so I think we could take this away and try to create a holistic policy in the conduct committee and then share it with this group beforehand for review, and then we can talk about it hopefully in January, but maybe in February.
I move to commit a request to the conduct committee to at least have a draft definition of what it means to be a member in good standing for review by the January meeting, with further development of this policy downstream from that.
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. All right. Magic, do you
Yeah.
need more than like 90 seconds to summarize thinking on this? You can have a little more. Let's
Yeah.
give it a shot.
I'll give a whirlwind tour. Okay. So the conversation about moving to a new location got pretty wild, and then people collected information in various ways, and also people felt like they weren't being heard in various ways. The events committee has a goal of having information and to decide things on by next meeting. I want to help enable that. I found a platform that was in part created by one of our community members that's been used by other things like the Taiwanese government. Here, I'll share my screen. Okay, sure. So there are articles about, yes, this window, cool. There's this tool that sort of gamifies conversation a little bit and also makes it so that it's a live conversation that changes as people commit new opinions to it. It's designed to find the opinion space, and it sort of expands in shape or shrinks as people engage more or less with different things. It looks kind of like this, where you answer whether you agree or disagree with things or are unsure, and you can also submit comments on it. I've seeded it with a bunch of questions that are sort of designed to be controversial so that people can agree or disagree, and they're largely based on feedback we got from Facebook and Baya's draft poll.
Hey, Magic, your screen share is not working. Could you redo it?
Sure. Let me see. Sorry about that. It's not super important that the screen share work, but I just would like to first, if Bea is interested in talking about it, get opinions about this. It is largely based on your survey and the feedback we got on Facebook and then the other events committee survey. Let's see if I can share. Are you able to see my screen now?
Still blank.
Sadly, no.
Okay, well, sorry, I didn't practice screen sharing in Jitsi before this. Anyhow, the notion is broadly that you interact with this and it changes shape as a polling system, and then you can sort of gain insights into what people actually care about, what they're like really inclined to, and where specifically there's consensus on divisive issues, like things that people broadly agree about if they wouldn't agree to a more specific thing. Stop sharing. Bea, are you able to talk right now, or?
Yes, I'm able to talk. Hi. But didn't have a chance to check this out yet.
Okay.
But in theory, it sounds very interesting, and I would love to be involved in that. So yeah, so that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
We would love to have you involved.
Thanks.
All right. You two should talk and we should figure out. Magic, I know that you were interested in timeliness here to some extent in order to get this to possibly feed into future conversations in the event committee. Can you two kind of work on this offline and let the board know what you need?
Yeah, I think I'd just submit a comms request for it. I don't think the board necessarily needs to vote on it. I just wanted discussion. So I think we're good there, and we'll work with Bea.
Hey, Magic, would you keep me and Tuck in the loop too, so that I kind of know what we're expecting for the meeting in January, if this is going to be in the events committee meeting?
Yeah, 100%. I will.
Dope. Thank you.
Meeting with you both and Bea.
All right, let's do committees real quick. Marley, do you want to do alumni committee first?
Yeah, I'll be super brief given time. Had a meeting with Marco about a bunch of different things. I think it's public knowledge, so I hope I'm not spilling any beans. Marco is retiring as RC. And so I asked him if he would like to be recruited. And he is considering it. And so I think he's going to be able to join the committee with us. Very least, he's going to help with some of the knowledge transfer that I've been trying to effect. And he's going to look at some stuff for me. So I'm excited about that. And so now I have kind of 3 members of the committee. So pretty excited about that.
Very, very cool.
4 including me, but 3 alumni that are helping out. So.
Rockin'. That's fantastic. Thanks for your effort on that. I think that's a really important capability for us to have as an organization.
Although he's probably only 1 year. He's ready to rest.
Fair enough. What other committees? I know events said they had an update.
I did say that. I can go next if that's quick. If people want me to. That's cool. Hang on. Okay, so just quickly, we had a meeting last week. We, as everybody knows, I think we are staying at the Masons site for 2025 for Critical, but it is still on the events committee horizon to be looking for new sites. We've had some interest from the community about that hunt, and so we're excited about that. So that is carrying on. We don't know yet if the Remlinger site will even be available in 2026. We haven't heard one way or the other. Hopefully we will know that before the January committee meeting to have that discussion. We now have a list of voting members that I am updating every time we have a meeting. If you are at a meeting, we record that you were there. And again, if you are there for 3, you become a voting member. And now there is a voting member spreadsheet in the events committee folder. If anybody wants to see who's able to vote, or if you're not sure that if you can, it's in there now. Sorry, I'm going back and forth. Oh, we are still working on the asset manager role. I have sort of vowed to myself that I'm going to get that application updated and out beginning of next year, so we can start doing that because we have some containers that really need some attention. I think that was the highlights. Everything else everybody's already heard at least once because we talked about it in the board meeting last month.
Great. All right, Magic. I know you said tech committee stuff.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. I also wanted to have a quick motion after that. So tech committee, we've been exploring a couple new technologies. We decided not to go with the new project management thing and stick with Notion along with Google Drive and everything that production wants to use, basically. We got funding for a new fleet of digital radios. These should be easier to use and not like crash into each other and make a loud noise like you hear when you push radios at the same time. Hopefully they're a little more friendly, and hopefully they work really clearly throughout the forest and around some corners. We're going to work with some testing soon. I have a lead on selling the old fleet. We're not going to sell it but before we know that we're getting the new fleet, obviously, but we should be able to recover some of the value of those old radios and also support another regional burn that needs radios and needs help getting licensing and stuff that we're all really excited to help with. I think that's everything for tech committee.
Okay. Any other committees? Jimmer.
Hey, on behalf of Acculturation, we are working on a video project in the long run. So a minor inquiry, if anybody has extra video tech that they would enjoy sharing for this in the long run, please let me know. Tech and skills. We are looking for skills as well as tech.
Thank you, Jimmer. Any other committees or officer reports? I neglected to ask about that. All
Probably
right.
just one on the treasure side of things. We want to close the books out for this year. We have not been very harsh in the past about, how long invoices can go out, but please try and get everything in before the end of the year if it's outside, so we can close it.
Right on, right on. All right. Hearing no more. Oh, Megaphone, go.
I lied.
Magic, I was going to circle back to other business. Magic.
I just
Go,
want to
Megaphone, go.
state for the record that applications for applying to be on the board of directors of Ignition Northwest closes on December 28th at 11:59 p.m. And if you know anyone who fits the bill for that, please send them the application. We have 2 applicants right now, but we would love to have more. We have 3 spots available.
Perfect. Any other business? Magic, I think you said you had at least one more thing. Okay, go.
I'd like to give the floor to Reboot to talk about associate producers.
Hello. Does the board believe that it needs to approve associate producers for critical? Or can I just pick people?
We don't usually do it.
Yeah, the last discussion that we had was that was all for you. Your job.
Yeah.
Okie
Get it.
dokie.
Do you have any announcements?
FYI, British Blue will be the first associate producer for Critical next year.
Sweet.
More to come.
Magic, go.
Oh, sorry. Accidentally raised my. We're good.
Magic, don't go. All right. Anybody have any other business before we adjourn? Hearing none. This meeting is adjourned
26.
at 8:26. Good job, team.
Nicely done, folks.
That's
Thank
2
you
minutes
very
better
much.
than last month. Good job.
Oh my gosh.
See
Have a
y'all
good night, everyone.
online and in the new year. Happy New Year. Happy holidays. Happy New Year, everybody. Bye.
Happy holidays, everyone.